UK infrastructure and utilities. My name is James Abraham. I'm the economist here at Glenigan. With me there's Mark Hansford from New Civil Engineer, and there's also Alan Willane, the economic director here at Glenigan. And we're going to take you through sort of the general outlook for infrastructure and utilities in the UK. So Alan, will you start us off first slide?
Yes, certainly. What I thought I would do is really try and set the scene is to look at what's been happening. To be honest, it's been one of the more positive sectors within the construction industry over the course of the last few years. It's been a growth area effectively during the recession. And I think overall, looking ahead, I think prospects still actually look fairly bright for the sector as a whole. I think there's some important issues which will be interesting to explore as we go through, Mark, particularly in terms of how our contractors and designers and consultants taking full advantage of this. What are the pressures they're facing? That's going to be an interesting area to explore. But I thought it might be a useful sort of point of sort of departure, so to speak, to set the scene as to where the work has been flowing through over the last year. And certainly, if you look at taking infrastructure and utilities work together, there was some sort of £10 billion worth of work that started on site last year. Now that's excluding big framework contracts and that sort of thing. We'll pick those up individually as they come through, rather than sort of the overall sort of £10 billion sort of area framework for maintenance. So these are sort of major projects really that are coming through. I think one of the things that's quite striking from the pie chart there is you can really see the dominance of the energy sector within it, particularly renewables. 42% of the value of work that started on site last year was renewables work, but that included some really big major schemes such as the London Array, which got underway. So there's some very sort of specific bespoke type projects, specialist areas such as renewables and offshore renewables at that. They've been a major contribution to the sector as a whole. I think the other interesting thing from it is to take on that is actually it's the importance of utilities and private sector for workload within the industry at the moment. Obviously, traditionally we've always thought about the government as being the main supplier of work for the industry. But if you take road and rail together, they're very important, 37% of work that started on site last year. But by they're the most dominant part of the whole cake.
No, it seems the world is changing, isn't it? Yeah. And we all know there are deep spending cuts going through, particularly the Highways Agency and particularly local authorities. Both are looking to looking at 20% or more savings over the next 2-3 years. And the conference last week, a local authority conference, and pretty much every speaker who took to a stand talked about grim cuts, savage cuts, depressing cuts. There was, which is a challenge and an opportunity there for the good to show that they can deliver savings, but a lot of the savings will come through just doing things better. But I guess you can't get away from the fact there is less money in roads, particularly, no surprise or secret that a lot of companies are looking to the energy market, particularly to replace.
And this shows that this is, as I say, these non-traditional markets. They can perhaps, because the traditional areas of roads is under pressure, it can perhaps give a false picture for the sector as a whole. I think one of the other interesting things when you analyse the data is the size of the work and contracts, and the importance really of really large schemes to this sector. In fact, if you take any projects generally over 100 million, which is the two biggest slices of cake there, so to speak, in the pie chart, that together, in schemes basically over 100 million, they account for over half of the work started on site last year. So there's some really big projects out there still that are dominating the sector.
I guess that would be no surprise to most, would it? But it does hammer home the importance of a London Array starting, or a Crossrail, or a major highways job, which obviously weren't any of those in that slide last year. But certainly London Array has had a big impact on the figures there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that it also shows is how those big projects, they can, if we just focus on the overall size of the work that's coming through, you can get a bit of a false picture. It's quite interesting if you look at sort of the recent trends over the last few years. You can see that overall the value of project starts has fallen because of being, despite the fact that it still accounts for half the work last year. It's actually it's down on where it was previously. 2009, I think, was an exceptional year, not least because we had the M25 widening project that was coming through. And I think that provided a huge boost to the overall start figures, but obviously the value of that work has fed through over a number of years. In fact, now it's sort of coming through to something of a close. And I think with these big schemes, is the time of the completions perhaps as much as the starts that are going to have a real significant impact on overall industry workload. And from that perspective, I think that maybe we're seeing perhaps currently perhaps coming into a little bit of an Olympic pause or dip as we go through, because there are a lot of those big major schemes like the M25, they're coming to a close, and they were deliberately timed to make sure that the infrastructure is in place ahead of the games. And other schemes like the Thames Link, that's been phased around the games as well, so that there's no disruption whilst the games are going on themselves. So fundamentally, we could see a little bit of a sort of a strange sort of pause going through.
Yeah, there's definitely a big concern there, isn't there, in terms of what happens certainly in the immediate period around the Olympics, where London particularly work is going to be very difficult to schedule around the Olympics. And then for the year after that, really, as you say, there were projects paused, and it's when they gear up again.
Yeah.
Because yes, we've concluded the M25 widening, which is the only significant road scheme really on the books. Crossrail, of course, is very much underway now,
and that can carry on because it's going on underground.
Well, largely speaking, yes. So that's encouraging, but we are now in a bit of a pause before the next big stuff starts. High Speed 2, of course, now being designed, and £750 million is going to be spent on designing that, whether or not we build it, but no guarantee we will build that.
We've got a question on that subject. We've got a question from Michael Mosley, who's wondering specifically what impact of Crossrail and how in the figures, and then also what impact the high-speed rail might have. So.
Well, I think the Crossrail, that will be in the figures. It's a major contributor from 2010 onwards and from last year, and we'll see further additional work coming through because that work's being sort of let out in individual contracts. That will be a sort of steady flow of work coming through into the project starts this year, going into 2013 as well. So
that is showing up in the figures already.
It is,
yeah. Well, that's interesting, I guess, because it's a big project, and obviously it's even with that big project in the figures aren't are down, which it is a big project. We're including that as on a contract by contract basis, so it's going to be a steady flow of work rather than one quite big lump of work, which is effectively how the M25 work came through in 2009. And in that case, High Speed 2 will unquestionably be the same, although I guess realistically they're talking hybrid bill sort of end of next year, aren't they? And so there's no construction contracts realistically going to be let before 2014.
Nothing before the next election, is it?
No, absolutely. So quite a pause for High Speed 2.
Quite a pause, but essentially sort of a really important project for the industry.
Well, the government seems to be so committed to it. I mean, David Cameron at the speaking at the ICE last Monday, he was speaking as if it was a done deal, and it was going to be built. Obviously, he might not be the man in place to make that decision, but it has to be encouraging that the Prime Minister is speaking so encouragingly about the importance of infrastructure investment, and whether that's privatising the roads, or which we'll come on to, or building High Speed 2.
I think that still will come back to that, but I think that is an interesting theme. That it came out in the budget as well. That the government reiterated the importance of infrastructure investment effectively to deliver long-term growth in the UK economy and for competitiveness. So
no, absolutely. You sense in the next 2 or 3 years, it could be a very good time. It's a good industry to be in. It's just the next year may not be so.
From even those major projects perspective, but I think, as I say, I think because of the pattern and the fact that once they do come in, they're contributing to activity over a number of years, and they can give a bit of a false picture of cross-rail, for example, as we continue to feed through over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think sometimes it's helpful to sort of screen out those really big projects, that schemes over 100 million, and look at the composition and the flow of work from that. And I think there are some encouraging signs there. Again, you can see the importance on a sort of a sector-by-sector basis of renewables and the energy sector generally, particularly renewables during the last year. It's interesting to see how that changes going forward. But also, obviously, the importance of road and rail as well. But I think it might be also, perhaps, if you look at the overall trend, in that underlying trend in terms of the value of work that's been starting on site and sort of coming through the planning process. Again, a positive picture there for both infrastructure and utilities work. I mean, infrastructure work in terms of detailed planning approvals, hugely, as you can see, it's sort of towards the tail end of last year. This is a 6-month rolling totals for both of those.
It's interesting that the planning approval spike there, and just you wonder how much of that is due to the changing of the planning system and the IPC, the Infrastructure Planning Commission, coming into force this year. You wonder if there was a bit of a rush to get stuff through before that came in, and now the dip we appear to be seeing now. Maybe that's the kind of that's partly because of this change and people not sure what's going on.
Yeah, we're trying to sort of nail things down.
Indeed, I mean, we seem to be very early days of the IPC, and I guess it's not looking necessarily. I mean, obviously it's introduced to speed up planning and make things easier. Yet Hinkley, which is the first real major project to go through it, it's currently not speeding it up at all. So, and in fact, this week the application was made from the IPC to buy a bit of extra time in processing it. So it seems already the loopholes are being invoked to delay the process. So there's a bit of a concern there that the IPC may not be speeding things up as it would, and maybe that spike in the dip is an indication of that. It'll be interesting to see that.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that sort of rise in detailed planning approvals is because they were coming from a very low base. We look back at sort of a year ago, there were very few projects coming through. Again, as you say, many people have uncertainties in the wider economy, but also perhaps in the whole sort of planning approval system. But I mean, some of that spike has been in terms of airport improvements, some big sort of bits of work coming through at Gatwick and Guernsey Airport, in fact, as well. But obviously rail, road, other important constituents within that overall sort of makeup. I think the utilities side is interesting as well. That's been a much firmer rise coming forward, and I think that's sort of encouraging. And I think again it's been very much underpinned by that growth in renewables work. And you can see in terms of the value of project starts, you can start to see that in a bit more detail in a moment. But sticking with the transport theme first, again you can see in terms of the government's emphasis, it's been very much on, in terms of where the money is going, in terms of rail. And these figures are taken from what came out of the spending review that have been published by the Department for Transport. And you can see that rail really is soaking up all the capital funding, and increasingly so. Sort of peaks in 2013. So next year is going to grow by another, next financial year starting next month, I think it grows by another sort of 20% from where it has been. So, and increasingly that has been at the expense of the national road network as well.
Well, it's a fact, isn't it, that the three biggest capital spenders in infrastructure in the UK are Network Rail, Crossrail, and London Underground. It's all three in the rail market, and all three secured their funding they wanted pretty much in both spending review, autumn statements, and their budgets going forward. So there's a commitment there.
Yes. I mean, we were discussing these figures earlier on, and we were talking about the transport, London transport figures in the data here. You were sort of expressing surprise at how sort of little it is, and I think this is because that's the actual, this is the government, the government money that's coming in, and that's just tip of the iceberg, really. So
well, it is. Central London makes quite a lot of money from fares, so yes, that's obviously where the bulk of their spending comes from.
Yes.
I mean, there's just certainly been an increase in spending, or quite a large proportion of spending based in London and the South East. Has that come at the expense of other regions around the UK, especially with the shift from road to rail becoming more concentrated?
So that's an interesting question. We get a lot of letters about people bemoaning the fact that all the spending seems to be focused on the South East. I suppose the reality is London is one of the 10, 12 biggest cities in the world, and is a major economic centre for the world and for the UK. I guess the argument would have to be you've got to get the infrastructure right around London, and the whole UK gets a knock-on effect. But that said, I mean, there are some pretty hefty schemes lurking around the regions now. The Mersey Gateway crossing is out to tender, and some very interesting consortiums are busy working on some very interesting value-engineered solutions to that project, and the budget committed to a northern hub, and the new Forth Bridge, which, although of course many being not built by UK firms, so maybe not doing too much for the UK construction industry, but yeah, there's a decent slug of money being spent around the UK, and I guess certain areas probably are, southwest is not, not got much going on there, and then there are other areas which are probably a bit limited.
But I think it's interesting you're saying in terms of economic growth as well, that actually it's not just, if you've got congestion in London and the South East, it has a knock-on impact across the economy. I think it was the problems with the M25. It was, people in Scotland have described it as the worst traffic jam in Scotland. So because effectively from the haulage point of view, it was a huge bottleneck for them supplying the continent. That's interesting. A lot of the investment that's going on now in terms of particularly on the freight, it's the Felixstowe line and things like that. They're sort of kind of trying to bypass effectively that sort of London southeast corridor, aren't they? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. Transport and improvements to the ports is an encouraging thing, which is getting noticed, which haven't been noticed for quite a long time.
This is a good opportunity just to remind everyone that if you've got questions, please send them in. We'll address them as we go along, or maybe sort of sum up a few at the end. So if you've got any questions, just write them into the little box on your screen.
Sticking on that sort of road and rail theme, it's quite interesting to actually look at how the value of work's been flowing through. And there has been sort of a general, you can see that shift in terms of funding coming through in terms of work that's starting on site. Now, it's slightly distorted when you're looking at the overall figures because we've got the M25 figure in 2009 there. But if you take sort of the underlying staff, which is schemes under 100 million, you can see that shift all the more dramatically there. And I think that's going to continue in the short term. I think we're going to continue to see more investment coming through. Clearly we've talked about the ambitious plans that they've got for the longer term, and they're not just actually high-speed tree. There's quite a lot of rail projects that are.
Well, I think that is a fascinating chart, that one, because it does perfectly illustrate the decline in the sort of the local road scheme, which we all know have been drying up. Very few really built. The A46, I suppose, really the last kind of decent-sized road job which has gone on, and meanwhile, smaller rail schemes, excluding the high-profile stuff. There's a lot going on in rail, and it's a very interesting chart. And I suppose if ever anything wanted to illustrate what the possible advantages could be of some kind of sell-off or privatisation of the road network to bring it more in line with a network rail or a utility model, well, that's it, really.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, it's interesting as well because obviously that's the underlying trend, and on top of that, a lot of the big projects that are on the pipeline. We mentioned high speed too, but perhaps more immediately, there's Network Rail's got its own major investment plans. We've got Crossrail contracts that are continuing to be let. Nottingham Trams now getting underway the extension to that. There's a lot of sort of light rail schemes that are coming through. But having said that, I don't know what your view is, but I've sensed a bit of a change in the political rhetoric recently. I mean, in terms of rail, we heard the Secretary of State saying actually basically, yes, there has been an awful lot of investment and that's got to continue. But on the other hand, we need to see much better value for money coming through in terms of what we're getting, both in terms of the operating costs on the rail side, but I think that also has implications for investment as well. And certainly there does seem to be a theme that actually you're not going to continue to fund that increase in investment through above inflation fare increases. So again, I think there's sort of a growing constraint there.
Well, the rail, like every other sector, needs to justify its value for money. Of course, the McNulty report, yes, did come out and say it was not as efficient as elsewhere. And of course, we're now just starting the next the 5-yearly dance for funding, and the regulator last week put out its first thoughts on what Network Rail may be allowed to spend, and it's factored in chunks of saving there, which Network Rail hasn't really yet worked out where they're going to come from.
Do it.
So unquestionably, pressure is going to be on to find ways of doing things more efficiently. If the spending is going to be spent on all the things that it should be spent on, I guess that's a great opportunity for the industry to show it can be innovative, and the changing structure of Network Rail, of course, is designed to encourage such innovation and creative thinking. So let's see if it does.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's interesting as well in terms of some of the rhetoric on the road side as well. In the budget, saying early on, it referred to the fact that investments in roads, for example, can deliver growth, deliver efficiency. So there seems to be a recognition of that. I mean, the catch is that then see that they are committed in terms of and restricted in terms of the funds they've got. So they're looking to the private sector to fill the gap with the pension fund investment and things like that. I think they've got about £2 billion potentially earmarked so far. Quite how that plays out and comes through, and whether it could be in toll roads or shadow tolling or some other form of investment, PFI for example, is yet to be. It doesn't seem to be too clear. I don't know if you've got any views on that, Mark.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's the privatisation idea is an interesting one, and we sort of looked into it. We looked into it last week, and one of the you can't hide the fact that we're not spending as much on roads as we did. I think the figures are interesting, really. I think in 2004 we built something in the area of where are we? Here's the figures. It's since 2004, the amount of new roads we built has sort of stagnated at 160 lane kilometres per year, whereas back in the 90s it was frequently 600 kilometres or more. So that's a massive drop in the amount of actual lane kilometres we're putting in. But then at the same time, the income which we're taking off motorists in road tax and fuel duty is falling quite alarmingly. The revenue coming from tax on fuel is expected to halve between now and 2028 as a percentage of GDP, just because cars are getting more efficient, and the road tax is falling off the cliff with everyone buying more and more efficient cars, which have minimal road tax supply as part of the green agenda.
So the green agenda is working.
You've got to figure the amount of money being paid by motorists is falling like a stone. So what sane government could invest any more than it's probably been quite bold in saying it's going to invest what it is saying it's now going to invest. Fundamentally, the model hasn't changed.
If you look at it on that side, they still take an awful lot more in terms of taxes from motor-related areas than they do expense on roads, I guess. So, I mean, that's always the argument the AA and people like that do. So but it's an interesting point that actually, true, but the receipts are sort of in decline.
Well, they are. Yes, you know, there's, as part of this privatisation agenda, there'll have to be some honesty about how much of our road pounds is actually spent on roads, and obviously that's something that, you know, is not something the Treasury wants to be too clean about, because we all know it goes into the welfare system, the health system, the education system, and all these other things we take for granted and cherish. And yeah, it's
one of the benefits of tolling is, you know, the money's being raised to pay for the road from a motorist perspective.
And of course, in the States, your gas tax, as they call it, and it's got to go into the road. It's a federal law. So, not so here. But, you know, it's interesting. And it's good that it's being looked into, and I think, you know, hopefully the industry will get on board with that and you know, feed into the government study into how some sort of privatisation could happen, so that it happens quickly if it's going to happen, and so it doesn't impact on, you know, on current programs and any more than it needs to, and actually, because some of this stuff, it could happen really quickly. We're talking about, I mean, let's face it, the M25. I mean, that part of the highways network is already privatised. There's a huge chunk of the highways network that is privatised. So it could happen quickly, and we need to push this agenda, I think.
Could you just clarify again the lane kilometre?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's quite. No, it's an interesting fact. And I'm quoting from the RAC, who did an excellent, I think it was quite good, report back in 2010, which pretty much set out what the Prime Minister has now just set out. It didn't get a lot of coverage at the time in the build-up to the spending review, but it's well worth a look. It's called Governing and Paying for England's Roads, and it's got charts in there. And the chart I was quoting from there is that around from sort of 2004 onwards, really a few ups and downs, but generally it's the amount of new roads built in the UK has plateaued at 160 lane kilometres per year. Go back into the 90s, where of course there was a new Labour frenzy of road building, and it was 600 kilometres lane kilometres at the minimum, really. So it's kind of almost a quarter of what we were building.
So in terms of new capacity, it's okay. I mean, obviously there's a lot of
hard shoulder running,
that sort of thing.
Which of course is, you know, it's a neat little sticking plaster approach, but fundamentally it's not extra capacity, and it's certainly not extra road building for the industry.
No.
Hope that helps.
Yes. I just thought I would go on now to look at the sort of the utility side, because we were talking earlier on about, you know, obviously road and rail and traditional things that we think of as in terms of wider civil engineering activity and infrastructure investment. But I think the utility side has been, you know, I mean, you can see from these graphs here how rapidly it's grown over the last few years, and it's now sort of really taking the lion's share of new work that's coming through. Renewables is obviously a key area for that. I mean, we all think of wind farms, particularly offshore, and they are major contributors. We mentioned the London Array and a lot of other schemes coming through. A lot of them actually, you know, really struggle to obviously get through the whole planning process as well, particularly the onshore ones. There's a lot of resistance there. But it's not just wind farms. There's other things like energy from waste and things like that. And I don't know if you've got a feel for. Certainly, we've seen a lot of projects coming through in the data that include those sort of projects. I don't know if you've got a feel for.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, very much. I mean, and yes, you take the water industry is pretty much what water industry is. It's in the middle of its spending cycle, so there's no kind of great shocks going on in there. But certainly from the energy side, lots of activity in energy from waste, which seems to be. So there's always a bit of a battle getting the things approved and built, but and it'd be interesting to see how the IPC helps there. But certainly there's a good chunk of that coming through.
And it does seem to be a lot of those, and certainly, I mean, it's interesting how that gets recorded, whether we record that as sort of a waste-related project. There's a lot of those, a lot of waste management and treatment sites and combustion sites coming forward, and they are definitely sort of a growth area. But it seems to me, sort of looking at these things, a lot of them have been held up in planning and political local opposition, that sort of thing. But it may be getting to the point where actually they've got to find landfill's not an option anymore. They've got no other option but to go for these things.
Well, these are frustrating areas, really, sectors, really, because, as you say, we all know we have a landfill issue, and we all know we need to deal with that. We all know we have an energy shortage, very much looming, and we need to deal with that. But as witnessed this morning with, Horizon Energy disbanding and pulling out and building a new nuclear power station at Wilfer, the market conditions and political conditions. We still haven't quite got it right for the likes of the big power companies to come in and invest, whether that is for new nuclear or big offshore wind or smaller energy from waste. I mean, there are still so many barriers to getting these things built in the UK. But you kind of every year you look at these sectors and think, well, this year has got to be the year that we finally act on this and do something about it. And but every year it seems nothing is done, and EDF has still not committed to building a nuclear power station. I think it's going through the planning, but it's not committed to building it. The other one, Horizon, has now just pulled out. So nuclear, you have to say, still looks iffy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly looking forward in terms of looking at the development pipeline, we can see, yes, sure, there's water, wind farm projects and that sort of thing being planned for longer term, but you can certainly see in terms of the stuff that Glenigan has been tracking on the system that there are more traditional generating energy projects that are coming forward, combining gas cycle schemes and things like that. The red pipelines you just started for the next year or so. So there's some perhaps more traditional solutions.
Yeah, that's probably.
And then you've got this offer of nuclear in the long term, which always seems to be.
Well, something has to fill the gap, and gas will be it for sure. And so unquestionably, that would be an area you'd expect to see spiking a bit in the next year or two. Absolutely.
I suppose, I mean, one of the things about the utility sector is that the building is being sort of spread across the UK. If we talked about the sort of concentration of infrastructure in the southeast, then we see renewables in Scotland and Yorkshire and stuff. And I suppose it's a boon to the industry around the country in a way.
It does balance things out.
They're building a new local firms involved.
Yeah. Well, they're building a new harbour specifically for supplying the wind farms. So there's a lot of sort of benefits.
Absolutely, there is a lot of related infrastructure to these things, which is, even at Hinkley, they are, the preliminary works contracts were signed earlier this year and are now underway. This does spread the workload around the UK. I mean, certainly the offshore is very much a northeast kind of centric.
Yeah. Can you say a bit more about the barriers to the nuclear power plant program? In terms of, they've announced, they've done the initial announcement, haven't they, that these are the ones we wanted to go with. Obviously, the front runner there.
Yeah.
But then is it just the planning details?
Well, there are two big, I suppose, separate hurdles still to be overcome, really. I mean, there's the planning issue, which all these schemes are going through the new major infrastructure planning unit, which used to be called the Infrastructure Planning Commission, but fundamentally it's an independent committee, which chaired by Sir Michael Pitts, which looks at all these schemes on their merits referenced against national policy statements for these sectors, and in theory make a decision which is removes localism in terms of NIMBYism from the agenda. But it's a new body and no one's been through it before, and so it's unproven and there's uncertainty, and the Hinkley one appears to be getting delayed beyond its plans. It's supposed to take a year max, and it looks like that could creep. So the planning remains an uncertainty because fundamentally it's how you handle the local versus the national criteria. So that remains a problem, which sort of plan for. So hopefully that will be, maybe it's a teething problems, and that will be ironed out. But then the real bigger problem really remains the market incentives for these companies, because at the moment, the the official line is there are no subsidies for new nuclear, but there is a carbon floor price, which is sort of a subsidy, but it's unclear what that price is, and it's unclear still at the moment what kind of liabilities operators will have for dealing with the legacy of waste. So
that's got to be a bit important.
So they don't quite know at this stage, if they invest their money, how much money they will be able to charge for their electricity, and how much they will be liable for the clean-up cost afterwards. So, and when you're talking about spending £5 billion on a nuclear power plant, that's the kind of thing you probably want to know before you press the button and start building. And that's kind of the fundamental problem, really, because EDF is a global company. They can build these things in France and Finland and Japan, wherever they, all over the world.
And there's a lot of demand for them at the moment globally, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, not Germany. They said they're not going to, but yeah, certainly the rest of the world there is a lot of demand. So, the question in their boardroom is always going to be, why are we wasting our time in Britain with all these problems when we could knock one up in France in 2 years and start reaping the benefits? So that is an issue. It's hard to see how quickly that was going to be solved.
And one of the things that interesting thing that strike me, I mean, I'll come on to the sort of give the overview of work. Now, this is again from the underlying trends, and you can see that it has been a positive picture during the course of the recession, and remains positive going forward. It dips a little bit in 2013 in our data. This is for schemes under 100 million, and on top of that, obviously, it's going to be the question of the time of these sort of bigger projects and how quickly they flow through. Obviously, you'll have Crossrail, that's clearly committed. Thameslink Phase 2, that's supposed to be starting after the games are completed, and certainly with the whole redevelopment of London Bridge, that's just going to see a major picture going forward. But then, as I say, we're talking about on the renewables and the energy side of things, how quickly that goes to the whole nuclear conundrum. And the other thing we haven't really touched on is the whole power network, as well, the distribution system, particularly given the growth in renewable powers at the new generating capacity, nuclear or sort of more traditional forms of energy. All of those are going to put new demands on what's an aging distribution network. So I think there's going to be quite a lot of investment coming through in that area over the next couple of years as well. And it's interesting, particularly with renewables, and particularly if you've seen the sort of the growth and then scaling back on sort of the micro generation and the photovoltaics and that sort of thing. That's actually, if you look at, say, Germany, that's put huge demands on their distribution network.
Yes.
Because the power isn't all flowing in one direction, and it's all going all over the place at different times, and can cause an awful lot of problems for their system, and they've had to overhaul that. So again, if we're going down that more flexible.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, and unquestionably there's a lot of there are a lot of contracts being left in power networks, aren't they? As we move to smart grids and all kinds of they're trying to collect power from all these very decentralized places. Interesting that there is a lot of workload going to be coming from those areas, and it gets forgotten, the old power network stuff. But there's some serious work in those. A lot of them are put in tunnels, and there's some seriously long tunnels which are being ploughed up and down the country to connect up these new plants to things, and also related to the energy and liquid and LNG, liquid liquefied gas. So building the storage facilities for these now. There's a lot of work going on down South Wales and there. So I think we have to remain broadly positive about where we're going here. There are a lot of good schemes out there, big and small, and really it's just there is a little bit of a blip showing in 2013, which people I think are sort of aware of and braced for. But beyond that, there are a lot of projects out there.
But I think the composition of the work is changing, isn't it? A mix. We were talking earlier on about road and rail not being so important within the whole mix as it has been in the past, and there's growth in perhaps more specialised sort of types of utilities, the offshore and that sort of wind farms, that sort of thing, and that I think creates new challenges for UK contractors and consultants.
Unquestionably, yeah, absolutely. A lot of what we're looking at now is very skilled. Certainly offshore, and clients are looking for very new and interesting solutions. There are all sorts of joint ventures right now, plotting and working out designs for the new look offshore wind. I guess that, the caution there really has to be, that we remain on top of our game as a UK construction industry, because a lot of this stuff is increasingly being looked at by overseas competitors. Certainly the offshore is very much attracting international competition, particularly if it's all funded by Chinese investment. Then you would have to say Chinese contractors will be very close on behind that. Crossrail is, there are a lot of international representation on those construction consortiums, contractors who haven't worked in the UK before, but have got in on Crossrail and possibly caught our industry a bit napping there, really.
But it's also an opportunity for UK contractors when they are in partnership with these things to other companies who are bringing their expertise in to learn from that, and maybe that's something that can also be exported to other markets as well.
Well, you'd have to think so, and you'd have to hope so. I mean, this week in NCE, our cover story was about the Fairmont Belt project. Start launching it. It's hunt for bidders. It's a £4.6 billion project. It's one of the most technically challenging tube tunnels ever built. You would think there are some UK contracting entities out there who've got some experience of this, who could export that, and we're only talking about exporting it to, across things in Denmark and Germany. We're not talking far afield here, but at the moment there aren't many UK contractors interested in getting involved. The industry day last week, which we went to, there were 500 people there representing 17 different countries, and representing countries from all over the place, and very few representing UK contractors. There were dozens and dozens representing UK consultants, but UK contractors, we're not there, and you kind of think that's a missed opportunity. And maybe that's something, as things look like they're getting a bit tighter in the next year or two here, maybe that's an option.
And we don't know, so we have got to be getting the experience from working on a whole range of projects in the UK that can be exported.
Well, all the time UK contractors build the world, and maybe we could get back there.
Yes, that sounds like an encouraging note to wish to conclude. But thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Okay. And
well, it's a good opportunity to remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded, so shortly be available sort of through. I'm sure we'll send you a link through. The slides will also be available. I think they'll come with the recorded session, so you can watch and listen at the same time. And yeah, well, thank you very much, Alan, for contributing, and Mark again. And well, hopefully join you next time for another topic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.